Welcome to Monster Movie Mondays, where we take another look at a famous monster movie. And it's almost summertime, and everybody's going to be hitting the beach, partying and hanging out. And the temptation to go into the water is always going to be there. But when you go in the water, you never know what lurks below. Well, in 1975, the American thriller that was directed by Steven Spielberg, based on a novel by Peter Benchley, Jaws, stars Roy Scheider as Police Chief Martin Brody, who, with the help of marine biologist Richard Dreyfuss and a professional shark hunter, Robert Shaw, hunt down a man-eating great white shark that has been attacking beachgoers in a summer resort town. Now, Jaws was mostly shot on location at Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Jaws was also the first major motion picture to be shot on the ocean and consequently had a troubled production as they had gone over budget and schedule, and the mechanical sharks were malfunctioning. So Steven Spielberg decided mostly to suggest the shark's presence, employing an ominous and theme created by composer John Williams to indicate the impending appearances by the shark. Universal Pictures released this film to over 450 screens, and that was an exceptionally wide release for a major studio picture at the time. And it was accompanied by an extensive marketing campaign that emphasized television spots and tie-in merchandise. Regarded as one of those movies that you don't want to be out in the water. Like, it really made people afraid to go swimming once Jaws came out. And as you can see why, how effective they made this film. Now, Jaws had won several awards for its music and editing, and it became the highest grossing film of all time. Of course, until 2 years later when Star Wars came out. But the opening scene, a young woman goes skinny dipping in the ocean during a beachside party, and as she's swimming, she has an unseen force attack her and pull her under the water. They rule it as a boating accident, but then shortly all chaos ensues, and we have ourselves a summer blockbuster that made it to the point where nobody wanted to go swimming in the water. This movie truly tapped into our deepest fears about what dangers would lurk beneath the ocean's surface. And a giant shark terrorizing a summer resort town would make some people even look twice into a swimming pool. Now, the shark, for the time of being in 1975, looked pretty terrifying. To today's standards, with obviously computers and CGI and all that, the shark would look, a little cheesy, but for back then, it added to the effect of the movie quite well. Now, Jaws had sparked a cultural fascination with sharks, especially great whites, that endures today. And they had IMAX documentaries, to Sharknado movies, to Discovery Channel's annual Shark Week, you name it. But Jaws opened the door for much interest in sharks. Now, with the main actors Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss, they actually were not the producer's first choice for the parts. They actually wanted Robert Duvall and Charlton Heston were those that were considered for Chief Brody. Lee Marvin and Sterling Hayden were initially sought out for Captain Quint, and Jeff Bridges was discussed for Matt Hooper, the marine biologist, which any of those actors would have probably delivered just as good as a performance with the movie. But the three actors that did ended up in the role, they nailed it. So the location scouts, they had considered filming pretty much a lot of places across the United States, but chose Martha's Vineyard because they needed a summer beach resort town with a sheltered bay, manageable tides, and shallow waters to make filming easier. And although the movie is set in midsummer, producers began filming in early May of '74 to avoid an actors' strike that was scheduled to begin July 1st. And if you look closely in the background of some of the scenes, you can see trees with no leaves. Now, the shark, which they nicknamed Bruce, was a 25-foot great white shark, and it was played by 3 full-scale mechanical models, towed by submerged sleds, or guided by hidden scuba divers. And like I said, the crew had nicknamed the shark Bruce after Steven Spielberg's lawyer, Bruce Raymer. And Steven Spielberg was frustrated by the shark's frequent malfunctions, so he had another name for it. He called it the Great White Turd. Now, at one point, Quint's boat, the Orca, sank unexpectedly during filming, soaking cameras and threatening to ruin the day's completed footage. The waterlogged film was flown to a lab in New York where technicians were able to save it. Now let's talk about the theme of the movie. John Williams, when he first played his ominous 2-note shark theme score for Steven Spielberg on a piano, the director thought it was a joke. But later, Steven Spielberg would say that score was clearly responsible for half of the success of that movie. I mean, come on, how many times were you in lakes and you would go underneath the water, or you would sit there and go, da-na, 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 da-na. You know, everybody remembered how ominous that 2-note shark theme score was. Now, local fishermen were unable to catch a big enough shark to use in the scene in which the town officials prematurely celebrated a large shark that's been caught and strung up on a dock. So the film's producers, they located a freshly caught 13-foot tiger shark in Florida and flew it to Massachusetts on a private plane. By the time the cameras rolled, however, the shark was decomposing and smelled horrible. Now, sometimes actors, they will ad-lib in movies, and sometimes those lines come out absolutely perfect. Well, Chief Brody, played by Roy Scheider, he said the line, "We're gonna need a bigger boat." And that was ad-libbed. And that's one of the lines that sticks out in the movie that a lot of people often repeat. Now, in the original script, Hooper, who is played by Richard Dreyfuss, was to be killed when the shark bites through the cage. But an Australian crew had captured spectacular footage of a great white attacking an empty shark cage. And so Steven Spielberg wanted to use that. So the scene was rewritten to let Hooper escape, sparing Richard Dreyfuss's character. So another fun fact is when they did test screenings, they revealed that the audience's loudest screams were for the severed head scene, and it was even louder than when the shark first rises out of the water behind Brody. So after the movie had opened, Steven Spielberg and screenwriter Gottlieb would sneak into screenings in Los Angeles and stand in the back of the theater just to watch the sold-out audiences visibly rise out of their seats with a collective shriek. Peter Benchley, who is the author, he can also be seen in a cameo in the film as the news reporter who addresses the camera on the beach. And he had previously worked as a news reporter for the Washington Post before writing Jaws. Steven Spielberg was another one who made a cameo in the movie, but it was his voice. He was the Amity Island dispatcher who calls Quinn's boat, the Orca, with Sheriff Brody's wife on the line. But let's face it, Bruce was the star of the movie, and that powered shark was designed and built by production designer Joe Alves, and it weighed in at 1.2 tons and measured 25 feet in length. And that was one of the reasons why Martha's Vineyard was chosen as a location, because the surrounding ocean bed had a depth of 35 feet for up to 12 miles offshore, which was perfect for the scenes that required the mechanical shark rig to be rested on the shallow ocean floor. But let's close this out with the opening scene, which took 3 days to shoot, and it achieved the jolting motions of the shark attacking a swimmer in the opening sequence. A harness with cables was attached to actress Susan Backliney's legs and was pulled by crew members back and forth along the shoreline. Spielberg told the crew not to let her know when she would be yanked back and forth, so her terrified reaction was absolutely genuine. Jaws was the first movie to gross over $100 million at the box office, and ever since it has continued to strike fear in the summertime when we go swimming in the oceans, of looking around and in the back of our mind hearing dun 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 dun. Thanks for watching, everybody.